Hi guys, this is Sam, and it is time for another Monday Musing. So this week I wanted to talk to something that's dear to my heart, and actually I don't think gets talked about quite often enough, especially not in UK small press, despite it being an influence on a surprising number of artists, and that is manga. So anime and manga as a whole is something that's really hit the UK and US hard over the past 10 to 20 years. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with it, how I got introduced to it, and how it's affected my own work. I'm also going to talk about my favourite anime and manga series, as well as some small press anime and manga series, including things that are inspired by anime and manga in very obvious ways. So this could be a long one. I'm just going to put that out there now. Also, again, I'm in the situation where I've stupidly left it until Monday evening to record this. The windows are open. I'm sorry, it is too damn warm. If there is a little bit of noise pollution, I'm pretty sure it's not gonna kill you. So, to start off with, anime and manga, for those unfamiliar with the terms, basically Asian comic books and Asian animation, typically Japanese. I believe Korean comics are called manhwa with a W instead of manga, but what's really important is that we make the distinction, the Japanese don't. So to the Japanese, manga is manga. Manga is comics. If you talk to them about Dan Slott, who writes Spider-Man, and will actually be coming up later on, then as far as Japan's concerned, he's a manga creator, not a comic creator, because they don't make the distinction. So, for me personally, I was introduced to it somewhat stealthily around about 10 years old when Pokemon ended up being a big thing, and actually I suddenly realised that a lot of the video games I was playing were anime inspired or had that aesthetic because, of course, they came from Japan, which is where this stuff is biggest. Now, Pokemon, I didn't really know it was anime when I was watching it, but what drew me to Pokemon was that it was a continuing story. So up until then, I was used to watching mostly American-made cartoons. I think the best thing I'd watched up to that point was Batman the Animated Series, and let's be honest, Batman the Animated Series is amazing. And while it does have a continuity, that continuity is mostly in sort of your rare two-parters, the occasional end-of-season episode, or the movies, and it's things like, Batman Beyond and the Justice League animated series, occasionally filling in the gaps of what happened to characters after the original Batman the Animated Series ended, and if you want to, you can plot it out. But essentially, the network could play those episodes in any order they damn well pleased, and you could miss stuff week to week, and it didn't really matter. Whereas Pokemon, I sort of sat down and was like, oh, this is cool, they're opening with a two-parter. Oh, okay, it's a three-parter. Oh, you don't see many of those. A four-parter, a five, and it just kept going. It felt like you couldn't really miss a day's episode. And that was new and exciting at the time. There was actual stakes. It sort of told me why my mother liked watching soaps, if that makes sense. Because there was this continuing plot that you could easily get invested in and care about, and you didn't want to miss it because then you'd be missing key information. Okay, maybe a little less so with Pokemon, but still, if you missed a day or two because you decided to pop around your friend's house or whatever, and suddenly Ash had a new gym badge, oh crap. Oh, why did I miss that? Oh, let's hope there's a catch-up omnibus at the weekend. And that was, it was new, it was exciting. And I started getting into more of those shows, the biggest ones, probably being Yu-Gi-Oh! And, I played the card game for some time. I've still got a big tin of them somewhere, as well as most of the run of the manga, actually. And then I think I'm only missing Millennium World Volumes 6 and 7. I should really fill that in at some point, just to bookend that. But the other one, of course, was Dragon Ball by Akira Toriyama, and Dragon Ball blew my mind. I mean, we started with Dragon Ball Z, which is halfway through the story. So Dragon Ball, when it was in Japan, started in the 80s, and the main character, Son Goku, was a little boy. And then by the end of the series, in the manga, it's just Dragon Ball all the way through. The anime sort of does him growing up is Dragon Ball, and then him as an adult is Dragon Ball Z. So we started there, and we essentially skipped all of him growing up, which was kind of weird, because then we got flashback scenes, and someone's beeping their horn like an arsehole, and we didn't know where those flashback scenes were from. We were like, well, we've not missed any episodes, but we definitely never saw this. It was kind of weird. But Dragon Ball was energetic, bombastic, furious. It was just, my mind was utterly blown, which led to, I mean, it was originally on Cartoon Network, but that opened things up to Toonami and CNX, I remember, as being the two main channels for anime in the UK. And sort of staying up until 9 PM when it'd always be like, you know, the classics like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, Trigun. There was a good, healthy diet, and it was, you know, these cartoons that all of a sudden started tackling, you know, drugs and sex and guns and death, and that was probably the biggest thing. Like, anime and manga, it didn't give a shit if you loved that character. They could die at any time. It was just like, oh, you like that guy? Dead. You like that guy? Dead. How about her? She's alright? Dead. There are so many anime and manga series where the ending is literally, and then everybody died. And horribly as well. It doesn't even kill them nicely. It's like, and then everyone died screaming. It can be absolutely brutal. And there was a shop in Norwich where I grew up. It was originally called Star Wars Emporium. And then they moved from, they're in sort of a, I think it was called The Alleys originally, over by Gerald's, and they moved onto a place called St. Benedict Street, and I could never remember the name of it after it moved to St. Benedict Street. It might have stayed as the Star Wars Emporium, actually. No, I'm sure they did get a new name. Either way, we went in there, and that's where I saw the first volume of the Dragon Ball manga, and me and my brother at the time were like, holy shit, there are Dragon Ball comics. So we picked it up, and the first thing that threw us is, and I can actually show you, they're back to front, or at least so we thought at the time. So it actually reads, and there's even a little picture of Goku at the top to remind you of the direction you're supposed to read it in. And it does, the whole thing reads from the right to the left because of how the Japanese language works, and that's how they read their written text. So of course, no, it would be the same way here. Now there were some early manga releases, like I remember getting much bigger, taller versions of No Need for Tenchi, which is of course Tenchi Muyo, and Neon Genesis Evangelion, where they had actually flipped the artwork, and I think my releases of Akira are flipped as well. And they called it flopping back in the day. Anyone remember flopping? I'm gonna get a bunch of, like, people from the late 90s, early 2000s in here, like, yeah, flopping! I remember that. But they'd, like, forget to change numbers and stuff, so you'd see a building that used to have 19 written on it, and it'd be very obviously backwards. And sometimes they went the extra effort, and they actually... So I'm flicking through Dragon Ball, because it's freaking gorgeous. But, let's just put that back on the shelf. There we go. My manga shelf is, like, there. It's right next to me at my drawing station because it's the first reference material I always go to. And that probably shows in my artwork, which I promise we will get to. So, we're like, holy shit, you know, this is amazing. And we're, like, reading through it, and all the stuff that was censored for TV, like Goku getting a hole blasted right through his stomach, Gerd getting his head chopped off, or Guldo as he's known in the anime. You know, all that stuff was censored in the TV release. No! Including some full frontal nudity, I will admit, that was a little bit... But, you know, it was all there. And we consumed it. We started buying and reading Dragon Ball. I've now got, you know, the full run. And I'm actually ecstatic because now the manga ran in Japan from, like, the mid-80s to the mid-90s and stopped. And then 20 years later, we got Dragon Ball Super, which is a continuation by a guy called Toyotaro, who was picked by Toriyama himself. And, the guy's got his signature style down pat, to the point that it goes beyond an imitation. This guy's got it. It's almost seamless from the end of Dragon Ball Z through to the start of Dragon Ball Super. Absolutely superb work. I'm very excited to have that back in my life again, and if I were to make a recommendation for a release, and I'm skipping ahead of myself because I wasn't going to do the recommendations until much nearer the end, but if you're going to get Dragon Ball, I highly, highly, highly recommend the full-color re-releases. So these are much, much bigger in physical size, but they also went back and they fully coloured all of the pages. And it's just enough, even if you're a veteran fan, it is just enough to trick your eyes into thinking you're seeing it for the first time again. And it is just absolutely beautiful stuff. I cannot recommend that highly enough. Right, back on track. So it was Dragon Ball, and I was big into that in high school, like majorly into that. And it was sort of like college and university, I started getting into other manga. I started getting into things like Love Hina, Death Note, Naruto, admittedly. It's just all this good stuff coming out at the same time. I binged it. It tied into video game art and design, which I loved. I absolutely adore video games. Tetsuya Nomura was doing fantastic artwork for Kingdom Hearts at the time. I was like, I'm stealing how that guy draws eyes. And I was in the the group of kids that went through college where all of the tutors were like, no comics, no manga, get that anime shit off our course. It's just like, I'm gonna draw it anyway because I like it. I riled up every teacher I had because I kept drawing in an anime manga style. Originally I just plain out and out ripped off Toriyama's style, and now I sort of started throwing in elements from other people that I liked, so a bit of Taikubo, a bit of Kishimoto, and I just kept a lot of Hiromu Arakawa, kept throwing stuff in. Nomura, who I mentioned a moment ago, and it started developing into something else, and a shit ton of Richard Elson, who didn't do any manga, but he did Sonic the Comic, which was the first comic I ever read, and continued to read for about 10 years. So, and that all became a bit of a hodgepodge until eventually I had the style I have now, which is very strongly manga influenced, and it's one of the first things people say when they, look at it or review it is, oh, this feels like manga. And it's because, Western comics like Marvel, DC, I did not read until I was nearly graduated from uni/art school, whatever you want to call it. And it was, at the time, I was reading the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog books, because that was my substitute after they killed off, unceremoniously cancelled the British Sonic the Hedgehog comics. So fine, I'll just jump to the American ones. Different creative teams, different continuity, but fuck it, close enough. And I was going to a comic shop called Abstract Sprocket in Norwich, which is still there now on St Benedict Street. Small shop, but very well run, very friendly people in there. It was just after Final Crisis, and I was seeing Batman and Robin on the shelf with, Dick Grayson as Batman, Damian Wayne as Robin, and I thought, oh, this looks interesting, and I started picking up a lot of Batman. And then got really into Red Robin, particularly the artwork of Marcus Toe, who's this amazing fusion of manga and, more British American comics. And even now, when he was announced for Nightwing during DC Rebirth, I was like, right, that's it, I'm buying Nightwing. He's not on it now, annoyingly, but for the entire time he was on there, I was like, it's like Kenneth Rocafort. If Kenneth Rocafort gets assigned to a book, I don't care what the book is, I am buying that book, because Rocafort does the most gorgeous and detailed artwork ever. His run on Red Hood and the Outlaws is fucking superb. I'm getting off track, but so I didn't get into, American superhero comics until around that period, and then I really upped my pull list big time when the new 52 happened. And that was only, about 6-7 years ago now, so it shows you that it was... by that point I had moved to Wiltshire, and I've been living in Wiltshire, about 7-8 years, give or take? Something like that. So it just goes to show that I was quite late to the party with the American comics, so of course I have a stronger influence from the Japanese stuff. And what really strikes me is I think manga does very well because you can get... Not only because it's got that continuity where you feel like you can't miss any of it, but also because it's a consistent creative team. So, every time I got into saying, oh, Marcus Toe is on this, oh, Kenneth Rocafort is on that, they got swapped out for someone else. Francis Manapul is another one. If Francis Manapul is on something, I am there. But, when he went on Trinity during DC Rebirth, I think he lasted 3 issues. Similar with Batman Detective Comics, he was on that for a plotline about anarchy, and then he was gone. Never to be seen again. And of course, if you want to take something off your pull list, you have to give 2 months' notice, and I got 2 months of some other guy. And it cheesed me off every time, I'm not gonna lie, it really annoyed me. Rocafort seemed to get longer runs for some reason, but... No, with manga, Akira Toriyama started Dragon Ball in the mid-80s. When Dragon Ball ended in the mid-90s, it was still Akira Toriyama. And that's something you do find with manga, is that the guys work stupid schedules. I mean, they work crazy hard. We're talking 3 hours sleep per night, 0 free time. But, you look at something like Naruto, 72 graphic novels in the end. At least I think it was 72. I've got up to 50. I don't have the full run of that yet. But that is Kishimoto, start to finish. And you can see the artists grow and evolve over that time. And you can see their style change. And you get an attachment not only to the book's world and characters, but you also get an attachment to the creator. And to give you an example, and I'm going to pull Dragon Ball again just because it's on the top shelf right here next to me. So if we get good old Volume 1, and we just take a look. I mean, Toriyama's artwork is quite soft. The lines aren't very square or jagged. There's lots of smooth shapes, rounded edges, and circles. And then... Oh, just put that back. There we go. We get to the final book, which is Z26, or Volume 42. Then we look at what's pretty much the last chapter. Where's actually a decent page for showing it? That's what I want. And you can see his lines have changed. It's a lot sharper, a lot more angular. The certain softness is gone, and the way he does detail has changed. But... One moment. I have to pull off the shelf, huh? Couldn't make it easy for myself, no. Right, I'm not editing that out either. There's no way. Anyway, but you can see, the artists evolve over the 10 years, and you can see the style change, and you're there with them. But I tell you what, I cannot pinpoint the moment it changed. I can't pick one chapter and say, this is the moment, because it's a gradual thing. And it's really weird to see, but also really rewarding, and it makes you feel very invested as a reader. And this is true for all long-running manga, so, it's true for Dragon Ball, it's true for Naruto, it's true for Full Metal Alchemist, it's true for Bakuman, and you can really get behind a creator, and you can support directly that creator. Now, the closest I can think of in terms of, American comics is, Dan Slott on Spider-Man, usually with Humberto Ramos, or however you pronounce that name, I apologize for butchering it. They had, about a 10-year run on Amazing Spider-Man, and Slott, it was his book, basically. He did what he wanted. And we got some fantastic things, like Superior Spider-Man, like Ends of the Earth, like Spider Island. We got so many great things, I don't even mind Brand New Day. Spider-Man had fantastic stories because it was a consistent creative team, and they knew what they wanted to do with the character, and they were given a certain amount of freedom. Likewise, the New 52 run on Batman, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, dream team, absolute dream team. I will be surprised if that Batman run is ever beaten, because it was fantastic. And you know what? The second they were off the book, I was done with the book. It was that clean cut. I was like, not Snyder and Capullo anymore? Don't want to know. I'm done. I'm gone. If they'd have kept Snyder and Capullo, they'd have kept me. As a reader, and I think that's true for a lot of people, you know? Because there was a certain Batman that they portrayed, and it was consistent, and as soon as you pass it off onto someone else, it's someone else's Batman. And I gave the Rebirth arc a try, you know, with Gotham Girl and everything else, and fuck me. I'm sorry, I'm sure there are people who like Tom King, but no, it wasn't for me, you know, it wasn't my Batman. Does that make, and that sounds horribly uppity, but it wasn't my Batman. So I got rid. And even then, I think they kept changing artists. Like, wasn't it David Finch, and then someone else, and then someone else? Because they switched this annoying release every 2 weeks model, which not only was a drain on the wallet, but they had to constantly cycle creators to actually keep that volume up. And it was a detriment to the quality of the books. A lot of people like Rebirth, and it's been a huge boom for DC, but for me it was a definite jumping off point, and I just saw the quality absolutely take a dive. That's going to upset some people. So, I think those are reasons it's easier to get on board with manga. Certainly for me, it's one of the reasons I love it. The other reason is that you do get diverse topics. So, while manga has genres, I mean, there's the shonen fighting genre where people can turn around and say, well, if you like Naruto, if you like Hunter x Hunter, if you like Fairy Tail, if you like Bleach, then, and if you like Yu Yu Hakusho, then good news, you like Dragon Ball. Because it all comes back. And you know, likewise, people are like, am I watching Cowboy Bebop or Outlaw Star? You know. And fine, fair enough, I'll give them that. But you also get, you know, things like A Silent Voice, which is, where is that, actually? That is on the shelf somewhere. I've had that in my hand recently. It's over there on this shelf. There we go, the shelf that is an in-progress one, because that one is full. That one is actually bowing. It's now got that much on it. But, yeah, A Silent Voice is a tale about a bully, basically, and a deaf girl. Well, nearly deaf. She wears hearing aids and such. And it's absolutely stunning. It is a really beautifully told story. If you want some feels, read A Silent Voice. Likewise, Your Lie in April, which is about a musician who was, basically, his mother was very strict and taught him to play the piano exactly as the score was written, and turned him into something of a machine for winning competitions, which I guess is sort of like our conventions for comic artists. And, you know, he, to the point that he has no love of music, and it's actually when he meets another girl, a musician later on in life, who sort of teaches him to love the piano and teaches him to improvise and teaches him to put his own voice into his music. There's Yuri on Ice, which is incredibly popular. It's about ice skating. And they're all essentially sort of the same theme, you know, competition, typically, but it covers a wide variety of topics. And I just think, you know, it's a wonderful thing. You've got some beautiful, beautiful stories. I'm actually just going to go ahead, in terms of, you know, stuff that's out there, you know, commercial, mainstream manga, I'm just going to go ahead and make my recommendations now, because I've come that close to just jumping to the recommendations already that I'm just going to do it. And this is all, I mean, this is only the tip of the iceberg, people. There is so much manga, so much, that I can't keep up with it. Like, you know, when Gurren Lagann came out, it took me a good 3 years after that series was out to actually, you know, get on board with it and check it out. Because, same with Code Geass, you know, I will get to something about 3 years after it's popular. In fact, I've been reading My Hero Academia recently. This is probably the most current I have been in years with manga, because it just moves too goddamn quickly for me. I can't keep up. Right, let's get to these recommendations, shall we? So, we'll start with the quote-unquote pro stuff, and then we'll move to the small press and indie stuff. Okay. So the first one's a bit of a cheat. Technically it's not manga, but it's very heavily manga-inspired. And that is Udon Street Fighter, and I know this is a big influence on Chris Imber from Reckless Hero, Last Sheriff. But the fight scenes, the way that bodies are actually drawn, it is so reminiscent. It's essentially like someone took a manga and then coloured it. Udon themselves openly admit that they want to emulate manga in their work, and the results are absolutely stunning. I've read way too much Street Fighter in comic form. Way too much. And I'll keep buying it because it's consistently been good. Next up, we have Negama. Now, a bit left field. This is from a guy called Ken Akamatsu, who is more famously known for a series called Love Hina, which I also have and also absolutely adore. It's got a sequel that's currently being published at the moment, which I'm a couple of volumes into, called UQ Holder, which is set in the same universe. Essentially, Negama is a 10-year-old boy wizard, not Harry Potter, who wants to graduate wizarding school and become a wizard. And his final exam, so to speak, is to go to Japan and teach English to at an all-girls boarding school. So to a bunch of, 13, 14-year-old girls. And it does get a little Japanese pervy in places. Like, every time he sneezes, their skirts blow up. Because of the magic power of his sneeze. It's so much magic energy. But essentially, if he gets found out that he's a wizard, he gets turned into an ermine, which is basically sort of like a ferret thing. Anyway, shit gets crazy real quick. He ends up as a combat mage doing crazy, insane fights, utilizing magic plus martial arts. He's got, a harem of girls that fight alongside him, and he can use these magical cards to give them special powers and weapons, and they then help fight alongside him. It goes for... I've got the full run here. How long is it? It was 38 volumes in the end. And it's actually getting a little harder to grab hold of. The reason being is that the guys who were originally putting this out, I believe Tanashimi, they went under, and then it was picked up by Kodansha. But Kodansha, for the volumes that Tanashimi had already released, did not have the rights to re-release single volumes. They had to release 3-in-1 omnibuses, so basically collections of 3 of these at a time. Which then made, I had trouble, because I was getting it in singles, I wanted to finish it in singles, and I really struggled to get the last few, so from, 33 onwards, it was just as soon as they appeared for pre-orders on Amazon, it was go, 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 and they're gone. But I managed to get my full set, that's what I care about. And, good God, I absolutely adored this series. I just consumed it. It was fan-fucking-tastic. We're gonna look now at a contender for my favourite manga of all time. It's a 20-volume series. It's from the artists that brought you Hikaru no Go, Death Note, and the manga adaptation of All You Need Is Kill, which are all fantastic in their own right. Some of you have guessed this already. It's Bakuman. So Bakuman is the story of 2 friends trying to get their own comics published in Weekly Shonen Jump, and it has to be Shonen Jump in their minds because Shonen Jump is the best. And first of all, look at... Oh, there's the camera. Look at that artwork. Does that not make you just sick with how goddamn good it is? I mean, seriously, look at this. It is absolutely stunningly beautiful. And it makes me feel inadequate every time I look at it. But this is the feel-good book. My God, I have never rooted for somebody so fucking hard. It might partly be because I make comics myself. And I see some parallels there. Oddly enough, the outfit he's wearing on the cover there, I was accidentally wearing that exact same outfit, and my other half called me out on it, going, "Oh, you think you're Mashiro now, do you?" I actually ended up wearing it as a stealth cosplay to one of the MCMs when I was behind my table, and like offered a 10% discount to anyone who noticed it, which a couple of people did. But it's just so... You learn a hell of a lot about the manga industry. The drama comes from their personal drama, their drive to succeed, and the things that get in their way. Like, at one point, the main character is hospitalized, and is still, against doctor's orders, trying to draw manga pages in the hospital so that he doesn't miss any deadlines. They are, at one point, they've got a hit series, spoilers, sorry, and they're given... They've got an ending in mind. They know how they want to finish it. But because it's popular, the publishers really want it to continue. So they're stuck in this awkward place between, you know, what would upset the fans more? Ending it or dragging it out? What's more important, their artistic vision or the monetary success? Ending it early and going against the publisher's wishes, that could affect, you know, their future chances of getting published again. And they could get a bad name in the industry for doing that. And, you know, they also tackle things like having a bad editor who's just giving them bum steers and who they disagree with, and whether they should take it, you know, take it by the reins and just take control and ignore their editor, or follow the editor's wishes because that's how things are supposed to work. There's a bit where they go up against another artist who is essentially creating their comic by committee. It's actually secretly about 20 different guys, and it's this whole thing about, you know, the artistic vision of two best friends versus a mechanical, methodically figured out, like, this guy's pretty much narrowed down a formula from studying other manga of what's successful, and it's sort of like instinct versus cold mechanical research and replication. And it's just a fantastic series. The kind of things they come up against I've never seen tackled elsewhere, and I don't think I'll ever see it tackled that well again. The closest it's ever come was a much earlier series called Comic Party, which is about... Hang on, I have that here too. And that is on the other shelf. Where is it? There we go, that's you. Now, that shelf is admittedly quite messy. There's a big mess down there, actually, when I'm trying to sort this room out, because I've got more stuff than I have shelf space in here now, so I've got a whole bunch of stuff out, a big mess, while I try and shuffle through it. It's probably going to look like that for a couple of weeks. But no, Comic Party, which is literally a small press publisher trying to make it at Japanese conventions. And it's a really interesting read, but once you've read Bakuman, this ain't even close. Like, this is... It's light reading, it's a bit comedic, but it's got no depth. It really hasn't. It's not... Bakuman destroys Comic Party in every conceivable way, but this was quite an early manga for me. This was really early in, like, my library had it, and that's how I first read it. And I do have a sort of fondness and nostalgia for it, but I would not recommend it to anybody unless you're morbidly curious. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Right. You've ended up on the recommendations pile. You were never there originally. Same for Silent Voice, actually. I don't know why, though. Silent Voice deserves to be on the recommendation pile. So, finally, from the pros, we have my absolute favourite manga of all time so far. And yes, above Dragon Ball, above Bakuman, Full Metal Alchemist. Oh, the feels. Anyone who's read this, and if you're going to check out the animated version, by the way, the first Full Metal Alchemist anime is crap. They made it while this was still being drawn, got impatient, and then decided to make up their own ending. It's bollocks. If you're gonna watch an animated adaptation of this, go watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which they made after this series had already finished, and they actually did it properly. And it was good. Who'd have thought? rant over. Hiromu Arakawa has told an absolute masterpiece. There are layers and layers of symbolism. There's mystery, plot, and intrigue. There's, like, she's thought of everything from day one. Akira Toriyama is famous for saying that Dragon Ball, he didn't know what was going to happen week to week. Arakawa, with Fullmetal Alchemist, knew what was going to happen in the last chapter before even sitting down to draw the first one. And there's even symbolism in the number of chapters it goes on for. And if you start looking into the religious elements and stuff, holy shit, does the rabbit hole go deep. It is, without a doubt, one of the most beautifully drawn books I have ever had the pleasure of seeing. It's just, it's fantastic from start to finish. It is a shorter manga. It is 27 volumes start to finish. And this literally, it tells the story it wants to tell, and it gets out. It's concise. The characters and world are just plain stunning. I don't know if I'll ever read a better manga than Fullmetal Alchemist. So I strongly recommend, even if you don't like manga, you need to read this. There are spoilers everywhere, so all I can safely tell you is that two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, tried to resurrect their deceased mother as children. Human transmutation, they tried to do it through alchemy, which sort of works like magic in this, despite it being a science, and there are very strict rules to it, and the rules are always adhered to, which really impressed me that the rules were so consistently kept to. So they tried to resurrect their mother, and it goes horribly wrong, and in the failed resurrection, one brother loses an arm and a leg, and the other brother loses his entire body and has to have his soul bonded to a suit of armor, which then means he can't sleep, he can't eat, he's got no sense of touch or smell. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible, the stuff he has to go through. And throughout the series, you'll be up, you'll be down, you'll laugh, you'll cry. I do not tear up at a lot of things. I teared up at this. Seriously. Go, read it. It's like $6.99 a book. They do 3-in-1 editions now where you can get 3 volumes worth for a tenner. If you only ever read one manga in your life, it needs to be Fullmetal Alchemist. So with that said, let's move on to the indie and small press stuff. Now, oddly enough, when I was saying this is the episode I want to do, in my head I was thinking, fuck me, there's not a lot. Like, although a lot of people grew up with it and a lot of people are influenced by it, there's not a lot. And actually, the more I sat and thought about it, the more I realised there's a lot more than I realised. And straight off the bat, there are 2 that it appears I don't physically own, which is something I'm going to need to correct the next time I'm at a convention with them. Laura Watton Davies, aka Pink Applejam, her series called Biomecha, which you've gotta check it out. It's fantastic. Here's the weird thing. I've been looking for it. Can't find it. I know I've read it. And what I'm thinking is, I know it's been online at some point, so I might have read it online and not yet picked it up physically. Also, we have I don't know if it's even fair to call her indie small press at this point, because she's much bigger than that, really. And she's worked with properties like Assassin's Creed. Sonia Leong, who has just a wealth of stuff. I believe her current one's called A Brush with Magic. And, yeah, check Sonia out. She's got a whole catalogue of stuff. She's been at this for years. Now onto the stuff that I do definitely physically own, because I found it, and it's here down beside me. So, this is insanity in that, you know when someone has a project, right? You take an indie small presser and they say to you, I've got an idea for an epic story that's going to be 210 pages per volume, and it's going to be a trilogy. And you sort of look at them and go, okay, that sounds really cool. And in your head you're thinking, it's never going to come out. It's never going to You are biting off way more than you can chew. You are never going to do it. Well, this crazy one did. I am talking about Chronicles of Gizra. It's by Sarah Child. Sarah has told me how this is pronounced time and time again. I've asked her at least 5 or 6 times. And, like, each time she answers is a bit more, dude, come on, you should know this by now. And I always forget. And it is... Look at how thick that is. That's just volume 1 of 3. It's done. It's finished. It's all out. She's actually done the whole thing. And it's just amazing, actually, that someone can turn around and say something that ambitious and that out there that, you know, makes you think, okay, let's temper expectations, let's maybe bring it back a little bit. Have you thought about doing 20-page chapters at a time and then collecting 10 chapters into a book? Instead of, you know, just going straight for the book. Sarah goes, nah, fuck that noise. I'm going for a book! I'm going for a full book! She did it. It's insanity. I need to pick the 3rd one up, actually. I keep, every month I go, I need to get that. And then payday rolls around, and I forget to order it from our web store. And then by the time I remember, I need to wait for payday again, because I've been irresponsible with my money. So yes, apologies for that, Sarah, that I haven't actually just given you my money for the 3rd one yet. The next one is by Rachel Dunn, aka Jammy Scribbler. Now, what they've done here is quite a typical tropey manga about wishes and wish granting, and the plot is actually, in terms of manga, it's quite straightforward. It's quite by the books and by the numbers. Frickin' adore it, though. It's a hell of a lot of fun. It's really light, really bouncy. And if you like your typical shonen manga, then you're gonna like this. Let's be honest. And it's kid-friendly as well, which is fantastic, because it's always hard to find small press stuff that I can, you know, put in front of my kids and be like, this will definitely be okay for you to look at. Unfortunately, Rachel has put that on hiatus, and they're in a bit of a, I say they because Rachel prefers gender-neutral pronouns, but they're unsure as to whether they're going to return to it, so I Wish Volume 1 and 2 is out. Whether there'll be any more is a bit up in the air, but what they've done is great so far. I'm quite impressed by it. Now we come... Lu Hao, Lao Ho, I don't quite know how to pronounce her name. I'm sorry. And likewise, the pseudonym Nanabeam, I'm not entirely sure again, but Mephistos, which is really crazy energetic. It's very, very scratchy lines, it's very sketchy, it's very rough, it's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4! There's no refinement, no precision, but not a single line looks out of place, and the result is drop-dead gorgeous. This is one of the most stylish small press books you will ever look at. This is insane. It's essentially a love story. From the 3 volumes I own and have read so far, I know there's more. I think she's up to, like, book 6, which is just this crazy rate of pumping it out. I need to get caught up. It's so good. Essentially, the guy is like a demon or something. I need to reread. But yeah. So that is, like, straight up manga from small press creators. Now we're going to come to manga-inspired or heavily manga-influenced stuff from small press creators. And there's a couple of these. One moment. So, first we have Heart of Time by Sarah Millman, who, I know, I shout her out like every single episode for just being awesome at comics, but it is, I think from the art style you can see that it's very, very clearly manga influence. I mean, just look at the face on the cover there. And how energetic is that? That's a face that says, I'm gonna fuck some shit up. That is an amazing... That's the thing about Millman's work. It's really expressive. Like, just insanely good. And speaking of expressive, there's a page to check out. like, the cover is just so well designed as well. I mean, I was sold on that circle checkerboard alone. That is... oh. Now we have something that's not quite so immediately obviously manga inspired until you see the inside. So this is Monstrosity by Zach Simmons Hearn, and he's now working for the Phoenix, I believe, which is a UK comic. But once you see the fight scenes and the panel layouts and special effects inside, the manga influence becomes crystal clear. And again, it's punchy, it's energetic, it's high energy, it's amazing. Right. Next we have one that was sort of a random pickup, and actually I don't even know if there's any more of this, because I got this several years ago, and I've just never seen any more of it since. So, here we have Hawk Hair, you know, as in heir to an estate or throne. And it feels very internet webcomic-y in terms of style, but the manga influence is crystal clear. It's sort of like if someone took RuneScape and then watched a bunch of anime and then merged those two things together. You'd get this. Like I say, no idea if there was ever an issue 2. I've not seen them at any convention since picking up issue 1, and that was some years ago. So, if you're watching this and you're still out there, let me know. It'd be interesting. Right. Now, this guy is very clearly Udon inspired. I mentioned him earlier. It is, of course, Chris Imber with The Last Sheriff, Operation Boom. Pretty much everything this guy touches reminds me of Udon's Street Fighter, but in the best way possible. His line work, in particular, is simply to die for. It's... oh, and the storytelling is fucking amazing, too. And he's a great guy as well. You couldn't... like, the nicest guy. Absolute gentleman. Really happy to finally meet him at Melksham Comic Con last year. And leaves us one more. With a very obvious... like, this reminds me of Ghost in the Shell and Akira. And considering I'm saying that about Small Press, you probably already know I'm talking about Metal Made Flesh. Oh! There you go. Yeah, you just look... As an indie artist, I look at a couple of pages of this, and it's just like, you know what? I'm done. You just sort of think to yourself, I will never be this good. Where do I quit, yo? It's beautiful book. Absolutely beautiful book. So yeah, there's a lot more anime and manga in Small Press than I thought. I'm sure I've not even scratched the surface. And there's bound to be more out there, but I'd say it's certainly a starter. And I think I'd love to see more people get into anime manga. And actually, as a separate Monday Musing, because we've been running for like nearly an hour or something crazy like that, I would love to talk about how anime conventions differ to comic conventions, and what one can potentially learn from the other. At any rate, I hope you check some of those books out. I hope you give manga a try. It's certainly been a huge influence on me. I've still got this cold. I don't know why. I've still got a scratchy cough, and I've been blowing my nose all day at work. But I've been Sam. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.